Welcome to today's show, Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess, passionate, inspirational speaker, author, poet, and entrepreneur. Welcome to Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm delighted that you joined me today. As usual, I want to give a great big thank you to those of you listening in today. I also want to give a great big shout out to all of you listening around the world. I'm delighted and so very grateful that you tuned in. Now, last week I was at a conference in Florida, and I reconnected with and met a number of new folks who live outside of the U.S. They shared with me that they listen to my show faithfully every week. How fabulous is that? So I say to all of you, did you know that you can now listen to my show on iTunes? Yes, you can. Thank you for spreading the word about the show, Legacy Living. Now, as many of you know, my goal is to reach folks in the U.S. as well as all over the world, especially those who do not have equal access to information, and in particular the kind of information that I share here on my show. So again, my hat's off to you. Thank you for sharing the wealth. You make my heart sing and my soul just shine. I hope you're enjoying a fabulous day today. I am. And I also hope that you're having a fantastic week, because you know what? In the grand song of the universe, life is very, very short. It's short and sweet and very, very precious. So I hope you're making a difference in your own life, because when you do, you also make a difference in someone else's life. Now, a lot of folks ask me, how do you make your life count? They want their life to count for something. And they say, Dr. Gloria, how do you do that? Well, it's really very simple. Very, very simple. To make your life count, you do it day by day, step by step, moment by moment, every single day. 365, 24/7. That's what Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count is all about. You can learn more about Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count by visiting the Gloria Burgess website. That's Gloria, B as in boy, URGESS.com. Now, I know that you're going to the site because I have lots of clicks to tell me that you're going there, so thank you for doing that. So that's the Gloria Burgess website, Gloria. Remember that song, Gloria? B as in boy, URGESS.com, or by visiting my Facebook page. And that's facebook.com/DR as in doctor, Gloria Burgess, PhD/. You can also tune into the show regularly right here on Talk Network Radio, www.talknetworkradio.com, TalkNetworkradio.com. That's talknetworkradio.com, all smushed together. Now, some people wonder, why does she spell this out? Doesn't she know that we can spell? Well, yes, I do. And I'm really aware that for some ears, I have an accent, right? And so I just want to spell it out to make sure that you can find it and find the resources that are there for you. One more thing, again, I mentioned this earlier, but you can now listen to this show on iTunes. Look for my show, The Dr. Gloria Show. It's called Legacy Living. You can listen live or you can listen on the go. As we continue to spread our wings here on Talk Network Radio, I want to thank you very deeply from the bottom of my heart for all of your support. Now, this show is part 2 of a two-part show. Part one was last week, and it's all about the brain and being vulnerable to your brain. And my very special guest, Dr. Mark Brady, says, you know what? When you want to have something happen in your life, and it doesn't happen in the way that you want it, especially, like a big goal like losing weight or getting into better shape or having better health or finances or whatever it happens to be, your brain can play little tricks on you. And he says it's not your fault. Okay? You might recall from last week's show that my guest is someone who makes a difference in his own life and in the lives of so many others throughout the world through his work as a researcher, scholar, writer, and teacher. Dr. Mark Brady is a brain scientist and a behavioral scientist. Last week, we talked about his work in looking at the brain and how you can make yourself vulnerable to your brain. Vulnerable to your brain, that's kind of a concept that makes your head wiggle, right? How you can make yourself vulnerable to your brain so it can help you achieve what you want in life. So in a moment, we're going to dive into part two of my conversation with Dr. Mark. He is the go-to expert on our brain and how it can work for you or against you. But before we begin part two of It's Not Your Fault, I just want to take a moment to welcome you. If you're just joining in, I want to welcome all the listeners who are just now tuning in. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess. This is Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. And I'd like to extend a special welcome to those of you who are joining my show, or if you're joining Talk Network Radio for the very first time. Let me tell you something. You are in for a real treat. I'm excited to have you listening in today, and I'm deeply honored that you've allowed me to be part of your day so you can be inspired by the ideas and resources to make your life count. Today's program is all about how to make yourself vulnerable to your brain so you can stop sabotaging yourself on those important goals you want to achieve. Join me now for part two of It's Not Your Fault with my very special guest, Mark Brady. Now, we've just talked about our powerful brain, and I've just asked Mark to respond to this question. What is the connection? What is the connection between addiction and weight management?
So eating bad food, at least for me, has the feel of an addiction. And what happens with addiction is you have an internal state that you want to change, and you discover something that really manages to change that state for you, right? Mm-hmm. And usually it's an excess of stress hormones. So I'm walking around with, let's say I have a really stressful job. At the end of the day, I'm really flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. My base level has been rising over the last few months. I decide I'm going to go get a drink after work. And what does a drink do? Well, it settles your nerves, literally. It begins to address the discomfort that adrenaline and cortisol cause in our bodies and makes us begin to calm down, to feel better, which is great because that's what you want to be able to do. Same with every drug, right? They make us feel better. The problem is that the brain gets acclimated to these substances and requires more and more and more. And it's the more and more and more that causes a problem with addiction.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Mark, can you go back to this notion of the prefrontal paradox?
Sure.
And I know that you've addressed some of the ways that we can resolve this this paradox, but can you just go back there and maybe summarize some of the things that you've shared with us about, what it is, the prefrontal paradox, and some effective ways to resolve that paradox?
Yeah. So your brain is basically composed of these little cells called neurons, and these cells have wires. There's 86 billion cells, and each neuron has roughly 10,000 wires connected to it. It's hugely massive. It's beyond our ability to actually imagine it. Okay? And we have these centers in our brain where emotions arise, and emotions arise often from either internal or external stimulus. And usually the afflictive emotions arise in response to some kind of real or imagined threat, right? Well, if you have a lot of wiring running, there's this structure called the amygdala in the brain, and if you have a lot of wiring running from the amygdala to the front part of your brain, right behind your forehead, that's the prefrontal area.
The amygdala is old brain, right? That's the
old brain, exactly.
Yeah, reptilian brain.
Yeah, it's what allows you to, like if there was a tarantula crawling across your desk right now, you'd immediately react.
I sure would.
Yes, you would. But then what would happen is you'd probably skirt back from the desk, right? And once you realize that, oh, he can't jump from the desk onto me, you'd realize that you were safe, and the adrenaline would begin to settle. And then you start to cognitively think about an effective way to deal with it, right?
Yes.
So that's the startle response, is the adrenaline response. And then the cognitive piece comes in afterward to deal with this perceived threat. And tarantulas actually aren't dangerous. They're just scary looking.
Yes.
As a kid, there was a movie that came out called Tarantula, and I just thought it was great.
And I'd probably be like running out of the theater, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's the wiring that goes from your amygdala to your prefrontal area that allows you to first react and then make cognitive, reasoned decisions about how to respond. Well, if you don't have adequate wiring, which, for example, children don't often, and many adults, some of them even get to be president. If you don't have adequate wiring to not be reactive in lieu of being responsive, then what's going to happen is you're going to have poor impulse control. You're going to go to the grocery store and you're going to buy ice cream, cookies, and candy. Right?
So what is it about some people, and I'm actually thinking of a real person, I won't call her name, but everything that you've said about wiring, all of those things, I mean, I'm sure that she has the kind of wiring we're talking about. And yet, when she sees a spider, not a tarantula, but just a regular spider, she goes into the startle response, and it actually, I mean, she becomes almost immobilized.
Right.
Okay? And so is that possible, or is there something else going on that you could talk to us about?
Well, I don't know the person you're thinking of, and I don't know her personal history, but my prediction would be something in her history has frightened her to a point of freezing in response to a threat, which is a very common response to many threats. Right. Right? So what makes a challenge like this difficult is if you haven't grown, and our brain